we can't electrolyze everything, we don't have enough hydrogen for everything, so we need to find a great balance in between. What does that mean in reality? Ultimately, we're an engineering company. I am one of very few non-engineers at Lyft. And we look to provide one-stop solutions for especially kind of end-user customers, industrial, mobility, to kind of bring the hydrogen supply chain together and come with these affordable solutions. And we also create next-generation products where we see gaps in the market where current products just aren't meeting the standards that we need to meet our values. So, we're 50 people and one hydrogen car, which I brought with me today. If you would like to see him, his name's Forrest. Not Johnson, but that is somehow where the name came from. He's pretty big, and he thinks a lot of himself. So, on average, everyone at Lyft has around 8 years of experience in hydrogen, and that's discounting all the people like me who come from renewables backgrounds. And we have people with experience with, running hydrogen stations in the US, doing due diligence on electrolyzers across the world. So there's a real kind of breadth of experience there. And we do everything from techno-economic modeling through to project engineering, project delivery, technical operations. We also have a beautiful asset performance management platform, which allows you to see every single asset and how it's performing. And we also do product development as well as industry relations, which is missing up here. So we kind of have a very wide breadth of experience. So what we're going to talk about today, well, this is very dark. So what makes up the cost of the dispenser, if you're using the right terms, and refueling infrastructure in general. And if we have time, we'll do a little problem solve. We'll have a look at one of the examples that we've recently looked at for a customer, looking at the cost comparisons of different systems we could use. So we'll start off with a nice value chain or supply chain for hydrogen. How many of these have you seen this week so far? 10? 20? Do they all look the same or all slightly different? Okay. So more or less the same, so I'll breeze through this, because ultimately when it comes to the end customer, and let's say that we're a bus fleet operator, you're paying for everything up the value chain for you. So the costs of your electrolysis to build it, and also, we had a great question earlier around the intermittency and not kind of having a stable power generation. That obviously impacts your price of hydrogen. It obviously impacts the additional things you need, such as storage for the electricity, extra storage for the hydrogen. So we have a cost factor there. You also have something around reliability, because you don't want to run out of hydrogen, because there's nothing worse than going to refuel your bus and there's no hydrogen there. If anybody's driven a hydrogen or electric car, the anxiety is real of not having enough to get you home. So we have the power as one part coming in there for cost. We have many kind of mechanisms for renewables to make sure that we fix the price there. We also then start to look at bulk storage and compression. So we start to marry, okay, what's the cost of the solution? So do we want to go for very large compressor frames? But if we go for one large compressor frame and that breaks, then nothing is working and we can't sell hydrogen anymore. And then we have to think about what's downstream for us. So can we compress it and go through the system to have more compressed hydrogen, but then mean we can fit more onto trailers, which can then transport more hydrogen to the end customer. So this is then, thinking ahead. Do we have the right kind of performance going through our system to get to the end customer, and what does that do to our cost? So ultimately, looking at our value chain, of which you've seen many times this week, reliability, cost, performance is what really makes a difference, and all of that needs to be priced in to the cost for the end consumer. So if we're zooming in to the kind of end of our value chain here, we're talking, again, it's a gas solution, we're not talking about liquid here. So what is the cost comparison that we can see these two options? So the most traditional thing that you will see is a road trailer will be filled with hydrogen, will go to a fixed refueling station. So in Germany, There's the kind of H2 mobility sites that I've also been testing today, which you'll drop the hydrogen. Drop is a bit of a throwaway word, but we'll take that. So you drop off your hydrogen and it goes into your kind of system, and then it's ready for somebody to refuel. You also have a second option, which is relatively new and is especially good when demand isn't so high. So we have mobile refueling options. So this is basically a trailer plus refueling dispenser on the back, so a little mobile refueler dispenser, and you just drive it straight to site, you park it, and when it's empty, back to the electrolysis site and fuel it up again. And this has quite a lot of cost difference. So the fixed refueling infrastructure is a bit more complex. It has higher capital costs because you need to pay for the entire station, as well as potentially paying for the trailer as well. It's got longer construction times. I mean, we've also heard, I'm sure you will have, projects are delayed, trying to get permitting, trying to get the admin through kind of various bodies to make sure that you have the construction right and on time is a bit of a pain. So you tend to have longer construction times, but you do have a lower cost of transport for your hydrogen because you're only running kind of one trailer backwards and forwards. It's a lot faster. It doesn't have to wait to be dispensed. It is just drive it there, empty it, drive it back to your electrolysis. So it tends to be a bit cheaper. Whereas obviously mobile refueling is kind of the opposite case. It's easier deployment, lower capital costs. You just need to pay for the mobile refueler, not anything else. It has lower delivery times. So most mobile refuelers in the market now, you're waiting between 12 and 14 months to get that delivered. So if you have a fleet where half of your, let's say actually 10% of your buses need to be replaced, you want to do that with hydrogen, you can just order that in line so that they'll arrive at the same time. But it is higher transportation costs because you're having to run the trailer, run the mobile refueler, but also the amount of time that it waits to dispense. So you're paying for your drivers, you're paying for kind of an asset that's sitting around that's not on the road, refilling with hydrogen, so you can make a lot less trips per day. So to go into a little more detail, and so you can see the next feature there. So we have a picture or a diagram of the fixed refueling station from Lyft, and also our mobile refueler. Honestly, it's not gardening hose, it's just the colours that we opted for the little dispensers here. So you have the fixed HRS, you have kind of in that, you have storage, compressors, a buffer system, an exchanger, a cooling unit, and a dispenser. So that's a lot of kind of equipment, a lot of assets that you're paying for to go in together. But it is the best application for high volume, high performance assets. So it's really economic when you're talking about high utilization of your site. If it's only going to be used 10% of the time, you're not going to get a good return on that asset at all. So it's all about, what's really important is matching the size of your infrastructure to the demand that you have. That is great in principle. However, we're in a scaling industry where a bus company, where people are only changing maybe 10% of their assets at a time. So they only have a small amount of demand for hydrogen to begin with, and it will ramp up. So most finance people will not make the choice to install a HRS for the capacity that you need in 10 years. So this hydrogen refueling station in 10 years' time will be completely optimized. No way am I signing off that agreement. That's a lot of money that I'm wasting. That's not going to be returned for a very long time. That will also need maintaining through all that time, etc. So it's really hard to scale because also if you build a really small one now, and then you go over the amount of demand that you need, it's not easy to just say, okay, we add an extra buffer storage. You basically have to decide whether to rip everything out and build another version, or add a second HRS system, which is also very inefficient. So when we're talking about scaling, that's why mobile refuelers can provide a pretty good option. So it's, like I said, it's just your high capacity trailer, something that's already in the market, plus a mobile dispensing system. So it allows refueling options that are lower in CapEx, but also lower in operational costs in general. It can also provide backup solutions during maintenance and operation and kind of operations training, but it is lower pressure and it's lower speed. So it's all this balance of cost, reliability, and performance that you need for your solution. So now we come to problem time. So, like I said, it matters about your whole solution that you're talking about. So your whole system really is going to make a difference. So this is a question that we got from one of our supplying customers. So they provide hydrogen and also hydrogen kind of infrastructure to bus depots. And they have 6 different depots around the city. They're all owned by different people. Nice. This is the US for you. All owned by different people, and they actually only wanted to change 10% of their fleet, so each of them are changing like 8 buses to hydrogen. So what is the right solution to provide them with enough hydrogen kilograms per day that they need of hydrogen? That's about 30 kilograms per bus. Most buses go up to 40 kilograms, but nobody's driving on empty up to a refueling station. So what are the options that we have for the customer, and how can we compare the costs for these options? So we could either, this is some great work by our system analysis team, we could either build fixed HRS for each of these customers. So each of them would have their own small little hydrogen refueling station on their site that would need to be built. And then we could use 2 trailers to run between these sites and drop off various amounts of hydrogen that was needed to be put into the storage of this site so that they'd have enough per day. Or we could run 3 mobile refuelers and drive them to the site, fill up all the buses, drive on to another site, fill up the buses there, and drive back to the electrolysis. So we had some options, these 2 options. And this is when you notice time makes a difference, right? Because in the first option, we only need 2 trailers, but in the second option, we need 3 mobile refuelers because they have to wait to empty. So they're sat all that time, so they won't be able to make the journeys as fast as just the trailers, for example. So this is the cost difference for this scenario that we had. So on the left, we have the CapEx costs that we saw for these systems. So if you build a HRS at these 6 sites, and you have the 2 trailers, and you have the export system on your production to get there, that's nominal in a sense, you saw a 42% reduction of your CapEx costs by changing to the mobile refuelers, because you had only needed these 3 mobile refuelers versus fixed infrastructure. You didn't have to build as much in general on the site, so you don't have as much construction costs, a lot less permitting costs, and just a lot less stuff in general. Then we saw a 21% reduction in your annual cost to run the sites. So again, less maintenance, you've got less equipment, so you don't need to maintain as many small parts. So just to maybe give you the numbers so you can see the scale. So the total CapEx cost of option 1 was 25 million you'd be spending for 6 HRS and the trailers. Whereas the mobile refuelers, we were talking around 15 million, but that also includes your export system, versus nearly 3 million a year to maintain the HRSs versus kind of 2.25 for the mobile refueler. So this really adds up over a typical 10-year project life, that this kind of operational cost is really coming down and really makes a difference. What I would say is always take these numbers with a pinch of salt, because if we change one variable, this case can change to the opposite way. So if it's not 160 kilometers we're talking about the range, and we're talking about 300, 400, then these completely flip. You need more trailers, you need more time on the road, you won't necessarily be able to charge every bus at night, which is typically a requirement for fleet operators, that we always charge at night, because that's when the buses aren't being used. Or we change to more city routes, for example, or less city routes.